loved all of your sessions. They were so good. I am still not able to hear you, so I'm going to ask you questions about your sessions as we were going. I had a Google Doc open and I was furiously typing questions into it, so I have more questions that I'd love to ask each of you. Because I am a little bit limited and I can't hear you right now, I'll try and look at your facial expressions and just take it that you're answering the questions. And when I see you pause, I'll try and ask a new one. So bear with me here, but we'll get through it together. So Christine, I'd love to start off with you because as I have this Google Doc open, it's went through each speaker one at a time. So we'll just start from the bottom and we'll go back up. So Christine, one of the most interesting things I think you talked about was all the different areas that you've moved through. And one thing that especially stood out was that you said that there were points where your journey was confusing, but you kept going and you kept moving things forward. So how did you do that? What gave you the motivation to keep going even when it was difficult or hard or it felt like the pieces weren't fitting together? What helped you keep going?
Yeah, I think that the thing that always has kept me going is the idea that at any time I can just pivot, right? So when you sort of hit a point in your career and you're like, I'm actually just not enjoying this type of research, or I'm not enjoying this part of academia, the idea of always being able to be like, well, I'm pretty good at picking up new things, so I can just pivot again, which I think has always been what's kind of pushing me forward.
Well, that's fantastic. So my sound is still out, but we're making it work. So Christine, I have another question for you. With the networking that you've done, you really encourage people to network, and that's fantastic. How did you get comfortable with pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone and taking on new opportunities like being here today to talk at Women in Quantum?
Yeah, I would say it kind of started with, I think it was a couple of years ago, but the University of Waterloo has won most innovative university in North America or something like 15 years in a row. So they have this innovation summit that they fly researchers around and introduce them to other countries. So anyway, a few years ago when I had not even really spoke publicly at all at that point, they asked me to be on this panel in the UK. And I was on the panel with the Dean of Applied Math from the University of Waterloo, and it was just the two of us. And it made absolutely no sense because I was just some like random researcher. But anyways, I was like, well, they asked me to do it, so they must have seen something that I'm clearly not seeing. So I'm just going to try it. And like, I'm just as a premise, it was like 3 days of being stressed out and being like, what am I even going to talk about? And then afterwards, it was great. Like I actually had things to say. And I think that feeling of almost like dread is, if you can get past that and you can like move forward with it, it can get you through a lot of open doors. So the other thing that I've experienced too was I was at the IBM Summit, I think 2 years ago, and I actually met Denise there. And there was like this networking event at night, and I also don't even look my age. I look like 20. So I went into it thinking like all these businessmen are going to look at me and be like, that, like, how am I even supposed to talk with this person? But at that event, the whole point was to meet people that are in this industry. So they actually had a lot of really great quantum computing questions for me. And kind of as soon as I had that first conversation and I got through that door, I felt like very relieved and I felt like I could move forward. But there is always that like hesitation and concern for sure. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. Laura, so next up, I have a few questions for you. So what helped you get up to speed with quantum computing when you're talking about making the switch into that space? What helped you get up to speed there? Because it can be a challenging area to transition to, and that's something that we hear a lot of people talk about, is that there is an overwhelming amount to learn with quantum computing. So what really helped you out here? Oh, I think Laura dropped. Okay. Magdalena, we'll go to you next. So it seems like we're all having a little bit of technical problems today, but we are making it work. So Magdalena, your story was really interesting. I thought how you launched Parity Quantum and you're doing so much interesting work in this space. So one of the questions that I would love to ask you is, do you have any advice for people who want to launch their own startup?
Sure, just do it. So I think the main thing is, so I did this a couple of times before, and there's always, I got this question asked a lot, and there's not one right answer. So I can only say what I did. So I imagined the worst scenario, then I thought, can I live with it? And then I did it. And so actually, if you have a great network around you, and you have people that can support you, and you imagined what you can, how you can change the world, I think this, even just a little bit, I think it's worth a try.
That's fantastic. So then you were also talking about best practices. You talked about having a really healthy ecosystem, standards and founding processes, and role models. But say you're someone who isn't in the same area that you are, they don't have access to Cambridge. How can they, so maybe they don't have the role models or they don't have the ecosystem. How can they try and build that up? Do you have any recommendation for maybe ways people could build their network, really good resources that they could look at for standards for founding processes? How would you, what advice would you have for someone who maybe they have one or two parts of that ecosystem, but they don't have all three of the whole?
So when we started in Austria, we had no ecosystem at all. So actually I had to Google the word startup when I started this because nobody knew what this is. So yeah, of course we had the big advantage that we know someone in Cambridge to help us. But there are so many other networks at the moment out there. And at the moment, because everything is virtual, you can virtually enter every conference, every network. It's so easy at the moment because everything is going digital. And so this is the time to really step into another world and try out this digital. Of course, I mean, someday it would be nice to meet face to face again, but at the moment, this is a great way to start, I think.
Fantastic. And so during your presentation, you talked a lot about paying it forward and a lot of the guidance that you're able to get along the way. Are you at a point in your career where you're helping the next generation yet, or do you still need to really be mindful of your own startup? Where are you at with that?
So if I have 5 minutes free in my time, I do try to help others as much as I can because I receive so much help. But I do like to, if I am of any help, I'd like to give it back as well. Yeah, I actually am still a little bit involved with my previous company who does that. And yeah, this is how I try to give back as much as I can. Yeah.
Fantastic. Laura, I saw you having some technical issues. No, it's all good. We're here. So Laura, we'll flip back to you. And then Sarah, I have so many questions for you too. So I'll get to you in just a moment. Thank you for your patience. So Laura, what do you enjoy most about the mathematics? That's something that personally I've struggled with math a lot, but it's something I'm really trying to pick up more of. So as you've gone through all these different areas of studies, what's been really fun about the math for you? What's made you stick with it?
I don't know. It's like a play, and I don't have to worry about the physical limitations of the things, and this is easy for me, but not for everyone. Depends on each one. I don't know. But I really enjoy the economic history now. By now, it's strange, but it's very interesting, and it's very connected with this part of my experience.
That's fantastic. When you were talking about your story, it seemed like networking really helped you out and like you found a lot of great opportunities through your networking connections. So since we have networking coming up next, do you have any advice for people who may be a little bit nervous about networking or anything that really helped you be successful?
Yes. Work with people that already work in the industry. Don't all the people that work in industry know how this works, but in academics we don't have these ideas. We only work in our papers, in our research, and don't have connections. So if you start to working with other kind of professions, I think that is the best option.
Well, it's wonderful. So Sarah, now we are up to you. I was so struck by all of the creative things that you have in your background. And I was dying to ask you, do you feel like your creative work had any impact on the technical work that you're doing? And do you see any links between the two?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great question. And I think that the creative side of, that right brain activity where you're thinking creatively and visualizing things, I realized that I'm very much a visual learner. And so being able to go on the whiteboard and sketch out a quick design, and one aspect of my job obviously is mechanical design. And so I spend a lot of time sketching out ideas and brainstorming how I want things to look. And so you have this, at least I found that I get a lot of creative flow when I do mechanical design because of, obviously functionality is the main driver, but also you want your form to follow the function. And so I think that the initial interest in art and just having that tactile experience of drawing or painting or even making things out of clay in like a ceramics class, to then be able to go on to like a 3D CAD program and bring those ideas that you have in your mind of, oh, I know that I want this mount to look like this. And so I can sketch it out in my notebook, and then I can jump into CAD and do it, and then 3D print it to prototype it or have it machined. And it's like, the same sort of process as creating art, where you're having this vision and you can create it with your hands and doing the same sort of thing. That was part of the reasons why I wanted to go into mechanical engineering, because it's such at least in my opinion, like the way that I've found my path in mechanical, it's very, very focused on making things. And so that like tangible, like tactile aspect of it has been very important.
Oh, that's great. Sarah, another thing that you talked about was envisioning what you wanted and then making it happen. So is that a strategy that you still use today? And if you are still doing that, how has that impacted your career or helped you out along the way?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me with that, like finding out what I wanted, especially in college and taking these classes, that I wanted a really hands-on technical job. And then realizing when I took my first role after college that, this isn't really what I want, and I don't think this is the right fit. And so noticing that and recognizing it, and then starting to think, okay, well, what are the actions that I can take? Because I could be frustrated and I could sit there and just stick it out, but I wasn't happy and it wasn't what I wanted to be doing right after college. And so it's like, okay, well, what are the steps that can be taken? Can I stay in this role and find a new project? Can I stay at this company and find a new role? Can I look externally? And so being able to realize what drives you and what gets you excited, and then start thinking about the small action items that you can take to get there. And so obviously, if I knew I wanted to make a big move from one job to another, that was made up of a lot of smaller decisions, like today I'm going to write one cover letter. Today I'm going to message one person on LinkedIn. Today I'm going to apply for one job. And taking that and using that drive, knowing that it's not like one day you're just going to get everything done, chipping away slowly to achieve your goals, I think is really important.
Oh, that's great. And I have questions for all the panelists now. So each of you have done a lot of pivots in your career, and it seemed like a common thread for all of you was that your careers weren't straightforward, which I think is really exciting. It's fun to talk to people whose careers are very interesting and they're not linear, and that's something that all of you have in common. So for all of you, I'd love to hear what helped you pivot from one area to another, and maybe to add on to that, did you have to get better at telling your story? Did you have to find a common thread? So what made you successful in being able to pivot from one area to another? Maybe Sarah, could you get us started?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, it was kind of like I talked a lot in my presentation about the great support network of family and friends and colleagues and professors that really supported me throughout my journey, both in school and then as I started working. And like, so to your first point, like how do you like have the strength to do this? Like how do you move forward with making a pivot? I think relying on like your support network and being able to verbalize how you're feeling, because I didn't know like when I was starting to feel unhappy in my first role that, well, do I want to move? Like maybe this is just temporary. Let me talk it out with someone. And so being able to explain what's going on, reaching out to your support networks. And then I think your point about being able to tell your story, to kind of take a step back and reflect, like, in order for me to tell the story of myself, I need to understand what it is that I'm looking for and what it is that I want. And so, like, I'm a very visual person, so maybe that means doing like a mind map and mapping it out and then talking through that with people. I know during the process of, making the pivot from my initial job to my job at INQ, I spent a lot of time talking with different people that would bring different perspectives to the table. And so initially it was my parents, and then I talked with the career counselor and talked with former colleagues, with existing colleagues, and just got a lot of really great support. And that allowed me to then hone my story as I told it to them, and then kind of organically figure out what it was that I needed to do.
Well, great. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I would kind of second that.
Yeah, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely leaning on like a support network to just tell you you're not insane for wanting to just pivot again. You just did that like a year ago. That's super helpful. And then, I think also for me, I've had like really great supervisors the whole experience, which is, I think, pretty uncommon, that I've had like 3 that were phenomenal back to back. And every single one of them is very open with me just kind of pivoting whenever I'm like getting pretty bored of whatever I'm researching and kind of wanting to like get into something a little bit different. Even with this company, like at the beginning I started as like a researcher, and then they were very open with me, just even like I do hiring and like a bunch of random stuff because I enjoy it and I like my day being different. So I think that a lot of my success in being able to pivot is largely due to just being with people that are allowing me to pivot. Like I think that if you had a supervisor that only wants you to research this specific project, it's probably not going to be an option, right? Or having a supervisor that's willing to let you like put one foot in the water with industry while you're doing a PhD, it would make your decision if entering into industry at the end of your PhD very easy. So, yeah, I guess luck is my answer for that.
All right, fantastic. So networking is open and live. So I think that we'll finish this off with a group selfie, and then we'll have everyone go over to networking. And once again, thank you so much for both our audience and to all of you, our speakers. It has been such a privilege getting to listen to your incredible journeys today.